Hello everyone, my name is Marco Ferreira and my presentation is comparing TPR and the audio-lingual method, or ALM. The studies I used on this page, most of the studies were conducted in either Iran or Indonesia. I currently deal with elementary school students, so most of these studies have to do with ALM and TPR in elementary school settings. Okay, so in this slide, I'm going to talk about the history of TPR. TPR was founded by James Asher in 1977. His ideas were founded on the ideas of trace theory. The idea of trace theory is that memory increased if it was stimulated through motor activity. It was also based on the principles of child language acquisition, which was that children do a lot of listening before they speak, and their listening is accompanied by physical responses. So what does TPR look like in a classroom? According to Brown, explanations are done through body language, voice, gestures, and actions. So students they learn language through body language, through voice, gestures, and actions. It's very physical. A lot of the things that teachers will do in the classroom, so the main thing that's done is imperative commands. So a teacher might give students commands such as close the door, sit down, say hello to your friend. And through these commands, students are learning listening comprehension, they're learning vocabulary, and the fact that they understand the command is reinforced by their reaction to the command. So if a teacher says, close the window, and the student goes to close the window, then he or she has comprehended the command. And interrogatives are also used, so teachers can ask questions. For example, where's the pencil? Where is the chalkboard? Right? And eventually students can, the hope is that eventually students feel confident enough to begin responding responding orally, and actually getting to a stage where they feel comfortable enough asking questions as well and giving imperative commands. So a lot of this is a lot of the bulk of what TPR looks like. So here are the learner-teacher roles for TPR according to Brown. TPR is teacher-directed. Learners respond to model language, and learners collaborate to perform simple routines. And this is pretty much true. In order for TPR to function, the teacher has to give instructions and commands. The teacher also models these commands. Usually when I do TPR, I ask students to jump. I show them what that looks like so that eventually they understand that without me having to model it. And learners collaborate to perform simple routines. And this collaboration can happen whether it's teacher to student, when the teacher gives commands to students, or eventually when students begin talking, they're able to give their fellow students commands, which they can then perform themselves. So Brown lists several strengths of TPR. One of the biggest strengths that TPR has is the physical linguistic connection, and this can also be seen in some of the studies that we'll see later on. But the physical linguistic connection, the physical actions help students retain long-term memory of vocabulary and other language used when doing physical activity. It is also low anxiety due to the fact that students are not forced to speak early. Students speak when they feel ready. So pretty much it's the teacher doing commands, and students just have to follow the commands along. And they actually get a certain amount of achievement without having to actually speak the language, by simply performing and doing the tasks that the teacher asks, the commands that the teacher asks. A few weaknesses that Brown lists. One, he lists the silent period being a weakness, and I kind of agree and disagree. I think it depends how much of the silent period you give, or how strict you are with the silent period. I think that it's good to allow students to uh, produce output when they're ready, but I think it's also good to encourage output. And I usually do this through things such as choral repetition or yes or no questions. I think you can push a student a little bit without um, putting too much pressure on them. Um, Other weaknesses are the overemphasis on physical actions and imperatives, which makes sense because language is more than just imperatives. So TPR may not be able to address different aspects of language. Okay, so now we'll move on to the audio lingual method, or ALM, and I'll talk about the history in this slide. ALM became, or it developed in the mid 1940s, and it started off as an offshoot of a military program during World War II. This program was designed to get people speaking um, in a foreign language. So pretty much this was a response to what the grammar translation method lacked. Before ALM and before the direct method, um, the method that dominated was the grammar translation method, and pretty much what this was the main focus of this was grammar, reading, and translating from the second language to the first language. There was no focus on auditory or oral communication skills. So this was a big lack, that big void that ALM was able to fill, and thus its popularity in the mid 1940s and 50s. So the ideas behind ALM, they come from structural linguists, and the idea that this idea of the scientific descriptive analysis. So scientific descriptive analysis has a lot of emphasis on pattern practice drills. Um, Also, very popular ideas at the time were those of habit formation models. So ALM appealed to these ideas. The ALM also added mimicry memorization drills. Um, so this is very appealing for this time period, and these are some of the ideas that created the ALM method. So some of the main features of the audio lingual method. One, there's a hierarchy of skills. So before anything comes to listening, it's believed that learners must listen to the language before any other skills are developed. So listening is first, then is speaking. Um, Listening is speaking, and through listening, um, it's believed that the learners are able to internalize things such as pronunciation, intonation, making them more effective speakers. The same thing is practiced, and intonation, pronunciation is practiced through speaking. And the ALM is very accuracy focused. So accuracy is very important in ALM. This is one of the goals. After listening and speaking comes reading, and then finally writing in the hierarchy. Um, ALM focuses primarily on structural patterns, and these patterns are usually taught one at a time through repetitive drills. So there's a lot of repetition in ALM. Finally, as I mentioned before, accuracy is seen as one of the most important things. So you can think of this method as accuracy over fluency. So in the slide, I have a few examples of ALM and some of the drills that are used in this method. One drill is substitution drills. So usually a structure is presented, and then a part where that can be substituted for something else. So, for example, the structure I'm going to the beach. The student could substitute I'm going to the beach with I'm going to the library, I'm going to the school, I'm going to school. It's very important in this method that the student stays accurate with the structure given and practices it and substitutes accurately. Another type of drill is transformation drills, and in this case, you might have a question where the student transforms the question into an answer, into a statement. I'm sorry, or vice versa. The student may transform a statement into a question. So in this case, is the hamster in the cage? The student will respond, the hamster is in the cage. Finally, there's response drills, and this is where a teacher might ask a question, how do you go to school? The student might respond, I go to school by train. However, the student wouldn't just say by train, he would have to say the whole structure. I go to school by train. This is usually what's emphasized in ALM. So these are the learner-teacher roles according to Brown. And the ALM method is teacher-directed. Teachers choose the patterns and structures that students will learn. Learners respond to the modeled language. So whatever drills that the teacher models or presents is what students will respond to. And learners practice target language on their own. This is also possible due to the fact that the audiolingual method allows for students to work in a lab where they can listen to audio. Some of the strengths, according to Brown, is the emphasis on oral language. And again, this method came as a response to the grammar translation method that did not include oral language. It was mostly reading and grammar. Also, it builds learner confidence through drills and repetition. And finally, the use of tape dialogues provides models. Not only does it provide models, but it also provides other other examples of native speakers other than your teacher. So this is a huge strength. One common theme that I find in the papers and the studies that I read were how well TPR is with facilitating vocabulary acquisition. In a study where researchers wanted to compare TPR versus the direct method to see how well each method helps students acquire vocabulary, TPR outperformed the direct method. The study was conducted with 40 students in Iran from ages 9 to 10. A pretest was used, and then at the end of the course, a post-test. So the groups were divided into two groups. One group was taught using TPR, and the other group was taught using the direct method. So at the end of this study, TPR outperformed the direct method. A similar study was done in Indonesia, and this was comparing TPR to ALM. And this study was conducted with 40 fifth graders in Indonesia, divided into two groups. One group using TPR, and the other group was taught using ALM. And at the end of the study, so again, a pretest was used and a post-test, and at the end of the study, again, TPR outperformed ALM. The biggest reason that it believed that TPR outperformed both methods was because one, TPR is a lot more fun for students, especially children. The physical connection helps with long-term vocabulary retention, whereas ALM, although it does help increase vocabulary acquisition, students tend to find it very boring, especially due to the drills. And these drills are also don't seem to sustain long-term retention. And we'll see more of how ALM compared to other methods. The last study I'll talk about is a study that compared the audiolingual method to the natural method. Natural method is pretty similar to TPR in the way in the beliefs behind the method. Um, in this study, a group of 40 girls in Iran, ranging ages 7 to 9, were split into two groups. One group was studying using the natural method, and the other group was studying using ALM. A pre-test and a post-test were used um, to see how vocabulary acquisition measured, and the group using ALM, I'm sorry, the group using the natural method outperformed the group using ALM. Researchers believe that the drawbacks of ALM were that repetition and drills became boring for the students. There's no emphasis on spontaneous communication. So natural method also outperformed ALM in communication as well. Um, and vocabulary is limited in the ALM classroom due to it having to be, strict according to the structures that are being presented, whereas natural method allows for more vocabulary exposure. Okay, to wrap this up, so I personally don't believe that there's one correct method to use. I believe that we should use different methods for different things for different classes. It just depends on what the needs of your students are, and depending on what they are, different methods can be incorporated into your lessons. So I believe that both ALM and TPR can be incorporated depending on what your students need. So hopefully this has been helpful, and thank you very much.